The sun hung low over the sacred city of Delphi, casting golden rays upon the towering columns of Apollo's temple. Pilgrims and priests moved through the marble-paved courtyards, their hushed whispers weaving through the crisp morning air. At the heart of the temple, Pythia, the revered oracle, sat in a trance upon her three-legged stool, her lips trembling with divine whispers. Before her knelt Lysandros, a noble warrior of Athens, his face tense with anticipation. His mission was clear: seek Apollo's guidance before leading his men into battle against the forces of Sparta. Yet, the words that escaped Pythia's lips were neither a blessing nor a strategy. They were a curse. Beware, Lysandros, for the tide of fate turns not in your favor. The blade of betrayal gleams brightest in the hands of kin. The warrior recoiled, his heart pounding as the meaning of the prophecy clawed at his mind. Who among his trusted allies would turn against him? Would the war itself consume him before he could even wield his sword? Lysandros rode hard to Athens, his thoughts churning like a stormy sea. The words of the oracle echoed in his mind, fueling his unease. Upon arriving at the palace, he was received with great honor, yet the air held a strange heaviness. King Themistokles, his once trusted ally, spoke in measured tones, his eyes never meeting Lysandros directly. The warrior soon realized why. Behind the gilded halls and the feasts in his name, there lay treachery. Themistokles had struck a secret accord with Sparta, promising them victory in exchange for peace and power. Lysandros' fate had been sealed before he had even left for war. His own men, bought with gold and false promises, whispered in dark corners of his downfall. But he would not bow to fate so easily. He had fought too many battles to surrender to the machinations of men who wielded words like daggers. He had to act, and fast. Lysandros feigned ignorance, masking his fury behind a stoic facade. He moved through the court as if oblivious to the whispers. Yet his every step was calculated. Under the cover of darkness, he gathered his few loyal warriors, swearing them to secrecy. He would not allow Athens to crumble under treachery. On the eve of battle, when his army was to march, Lysandros took a bold step. He confronted Themistokles in the grand hall, a blade hidden beneath his cloak. "I know your treachery," he growled, his voice steady despite the fire in his veins. The king smirked, as if unsurprised. "You were always clever, Lysandros," he mused. "But cleverness is a poor shield against fate." At that moment, the chamber doors burst open. Soldiers, once his own, now Themistokles' pawns, poured in, swords gleaming. Lysandros fought like a lion, but the numbers were against him. His men held them back long enough for him to flee into the night. The war was no longer on the battlefield. It was within the walls of his beloved city. Lysandros fled to the countryside, seeking refuge in the ruins of an old temple. The night was thick with the cries of owls and the rustling of unseen creatures. He knelt before a broken statue of Athena, whispering a prayer for wisdom and vengeance. The gods, it seemed, had not abandoned him. A shadow moved in the moonlight, a priestess of Athena, cloaked in silver robes. "The gods hear your plight, Lysandros," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "You must not fight as a man fights, but as the gods would have you fight. Patience, cunning, strike not with force, but with destiny's hand." Her words breathed life into his weary spirit. Lysandros was no longer just a warrior. He was a harbinger of divine justice. He would reclaim Athens, not through brute strength, but through the unraveling of Themistokles' web of lies. The battle for the soul of the city had begun. The dawn of reckoning arrived. Word of Lysandros' survival had spread like wildfire, igniting rebellion in the hearts of the oppressed. The people of Athens, weary of Themistokles' rule, rose with him. As the city streets burned with torches and battle cries, Lysandros led his charge. The palace, once a fortress of power, became a prison of fear for the traitorous king. Themistokles, cornered in his own throne room, faced the man he had wronged. "You defied fate," he spat, desperation in his voice. "No," Lysandros corrected, raising his sword. "I shaped it." The blade fell, and with it, the reign of treachery ended. Athens stood free once more, not by the will of an oracle's curse, but by the unbreakable spirit of a warrior who refused to be bound by prophecy. The city of Athens stood renewed, yet Lysandros felt the weight of his deeds upon his shoulders. The people hailed him as a hero, but the shadows of war clung to him. Could he ever escape the prophecy that had led him down this path? As he gazed upon the Acropolis, now bathed in the golden hues of dusk, he understood his true battle had just begun. Peace was not won with the fall of a tyrant. It had to be safeguarded with every breath. The gods had chosen him, not for war, but for wisdom. And so, with the blood of his past still fresh, Lysandros turned his eyes to the future, determined to forge a new legacy beyond the sword. Months passed, and Athens began to heal. Lysandros, now a leader not by conquest, but by the will of the people, laid the foundation for a new era. Schools of philosophy flourished, and the arts thrived under his careful guidance. But in the quiet hours of the night, he would stand upon the city walls, gazing into the horizon, wondering if fate had truly been conquered, or if it merely awaited another chance to strike. Years passed, and Athens prospered under Lysandros' rule. Yet fate was not so easily denied. A new enemy emerged from within, those who still whispered of kings and absolute power. Lysandros, ever weary of betrayal, sought to secure Athens' future by enacting laws that would preserve democracy beyond the reach of ambitious rulers. But his enemies conspired in silence. One fateful night, as he stood upon the steps of the Parthenon, reflecting on all he had built, a blade found its way between his ribs. A young man, one he had trusted, whispered, "Even the strongest cannot escape the will of the gods." Lysandros staggered, the city he had saved shimmering in the firelight before his darkening eyes. He fell to his knees, his final breath escaping as he whispered, "I shaped fate, but fate has shaped me." Though Lysandros fell, his legacy endured. The people of Athens, inspired by his vision, ensured that tyranny would never again take root. His name became legend, whispered in the halls of philosophers, and carved into the very stones of the city. The gods had cursed him, yet in defying their will, he had forged something greater, a city that would stand for centuries beyond his time. And as the winds carried his story through the ages, even the gods themselves could not help but listen.